Rural Uttar Pradesh, 2012. A 10-year-old boy with cricket in his veins embarks on a miraculous and dangerous journey of about 1,000 miles from his village to one of the biggest cities in the world, Mumbai. Initially living with his uncle in the northern suburbs, but sadly, that doesn't quite work out for him. Mumbai's intense commute consumed precious hours of his daily time, prompting the boy to seek refuge in a dairy shop, where he exchanged his labour just for a place to sleep. However, that went away as well. The only thing that really stuck around was his passion for cricket. And around this point, his parents were begging for him to come home. Why wouldn't they be? Their young boy was alone and things weren't working. But instead, he went to the Azad Maidan, where he took residence in the Muslim United Club ground staff tent. More than almost any player before him, this boy found a home in cricket. This test match, that boy, Yashasvi Jaiswal, made 209 runs in the first innings, more than half of India's total. He truly is the boy who batted. So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your Nord VPN plan, plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects its nether region with NordVPN today. The problem for India cricket is that two things are kind of true simultaneously, and they couldn't be any more removed from each other. We have never had a cricket team with this much power, money, and impact as the Indian side, probably since, I don't know, international cricket began. Maybe the old England side is the only one. Essentially, India are Amazon, and all the other boards are selling second-hand books on the weekend at a local church stall. Every decision made in our game is made with India in mind or under the shadow that they cast. And that's not even including the stars. Virat Kohli has 60 million Twitter followers, which is a ratio of about 30 million people to every one non-sponsored tweet. Rohit Sharma has a huge army of supporters as well, that he deals with as graciously as he does playing a pull shot. And R. Ashwin is trying to make nerds cool again inside of India. We know the players' partners, their childhood friends, and randomly overly personal stories about them. But even stars this big have to start somewhere. And the origin stories of Indian players continues to be just absolutely fascinating. And we can be romantic about it, but how about just looking at, I don't know, mass? In 2010, there were more than 50 million men aged 25 to 29 inside India. That is about how many people in total live in England or South Africa. And that is just men in their peak athletic years, although some of them might be beyond the hill by then. And at any stage, you could argue an Indian player is at least a 1 in a 10 million chance of playing for their country. So if you work out how many men they have from the age of 18 to 35, you could say that any Indian player is at best like a 1 in 10 million chance of playing for their country. But that doesn't include stories, right? Jaiswal is an extreme example, but look at Mukesh Kumar. He is from a farm near Bharat. And he was, in both ways, about as far from a big city as you can be. And he was on his way to becoming a police officer. But somehow he failed on fitness grounds, so he thought he might as well just take cricket a little bit more seriously. The issue was that Bihar is not really a hotbed of our sport. So without any premier domestic cricket to play, he actually made his money as a bowler for hire in tape ball leagues. It was only when his father dragged him to Kolkata that things finally started to change for him. And do you know what he wants to do when he finishes cricket? Not become an underwear model or date actresses or become a celebrity game show contestant. He wants to go back to his village and farm. Rajat Patidar is a late bloomer. He was a fast bowler who tore the ACL in his knee, so he took to off spin. Unfortunately, that didn't work either. So finally, with no other choices, he picked up the bat. His first year in the IPL was 2021, and by then, he was almost 30, and he failed. And he wasn't picked up for the 2022 season. When he was offered a spot, he was actually preparing to be married, and he wasn't sure that sitting in an IPL bench was worth changing his wedding for. He was finally convinced to pick up the IPL, and that year he averaged 50, making over 300 runs with a huge strike rate. And he should have been on the rise to stardom, but the next year he injured his foot and missed the following season. His career is full of half starts and injuries, but now with his wedding behind him and other people getting hurt, he gets his chance. Rajat Patidar dreamed of bowling for India, and instead he batted at number 5. Akshay Patel's name is spelled the way it is because his high school principal made a mistake in one of his forms. And you might be asking, well, why would that matter? Well, because when he was chosen to play for India under-19s, a series of incidents from a sitcom occurred to him because he didn't actually have a passport. In one moment, his life and his name changed. The first year that Shreyas Iyer turned up at Pravin Amre's camp, it was already full and he was sent away. And if you look at his entire career, things like that keep happening to him. He probably should have played a lot more ODI cricket early on and even taken over a spot for the 2019 World Cup team. And his chance in Test cricket could have come, 3 years earlier than it did? What about KS Bharat, who started as a ball boy in Vizag? Since the former Indian captain Vizzy stopped playing, Vizag has not exactly been a hotbed of cricket decision-making. But Bharat got a taste of what his life could be when he was the ball boy on the boundary for an MS Dhoni 100. But this specialist keeper didn't even take up the gloves until he was like 19 years old. And then he had to wait for, Dhoni, and outshine Dinesh Karthik's shirts and Riddiman Saha's great hands and be available after Rishabh Pant's freak injury. It meant that at times KS Bharat was playing for India A, but he was probably the 5th choice wicketkeeper on the depth charts. And we haven't even mentioned KL Rahul in that. How the hell did this ball boy become India's wicketkeeper in the first place? Kuldeep Yadav was a player who was thrust through the system in part because he bowled the right kind of bowling with the wrong arm. He was a freak show performer, and then of course what often happens with left arm wrist spinners is it starts to go away. Only he just went off and made himself a better bowler, perhaps even more impactful than when he first turned up and no one could play him. But of course, in some ways, he was already prepared for all this because he had already come back once. As a kid, he wanted to be Wasim Akram. The only problem was he's clearly not that kind of athlete. So he took up wrist spin, and here he is. So you might be wondering why I'm talking about all these different stories. Well, years ago, I wrote about how important it was to Sri Lanka to defeat India in the 2014 World Cup. And people were really upset at me. To them, these were just two cricket teams, one beat the other, simple as that. But it's not, is it? The history and positioning of nations plays a huge part. But so does simple humanity. These are real-life people on this field. India have an inexperienced side, Bazball is clearly playing with their minds, and they had to hold on as England came for them. Sometimes we get lost in the cricket of it, and we forget that these are real-life human beings playing this game. And it's clearly not just India either. Jimmy Anderson was a club bowler who got fast and was thrust into professional sport. Rayan Ahmed is essentially just a huge cricket nerd plucked from nowhere. And Jack Leach has been battling his own body his entire life. And so India won this test on the back of Jasprit Bumrah's incredible bowling performance. But also two fantastic innings. One by Shubman Gill, who is now a man. But even so, his father still complains when he only gets 100 in an ODI and not a double. And then that brings us back to Jaiswal. I know 30-year-olds who don't know what they're going to do with their life. And I know 15-year-olds I wouldn't trust to get the groceries from the local shop. And at 10, he crossed a massive country to make his dream come true. Thinking of all the things that could have gone wrong, and probably have, to others making similar journeys is actually kind of heartbreaking. Instead, Jaiswal runs into a mentor who saw something of himself in this small boy and trained him up. But more importantly than that, he gave him food and a place to lay his head. There, Jaiswal climbed the incredibly competitive world of Mumbai cricket, which, for a kid with talent, a stable home, and middle-class support, is still incredibly tough. Yet, at 17, he made his domestic debut. The under-19s, IPL, and Test stardom have already followed. Jaiswal has only lived 22 years. That is 2 less than Sachin's international career, and yet in that small period, he has already crammed in a lifetime of living. In this test, he had to go up against Anderson, who has spells longer than Jaiswal has been alive. He may have started as the boy who batted, but he was the man who won this test.